Welcome back. My name is Judith Gombás, and today I'm having a very special guest. I'm super happy that she accepted my invitation. She's Solveig Sjöstedt, former headmaster of the Swedish School for the Blind in Helsinki, former cooperative of Nordic and Baltic states for ICEVI, and actually a lot more. And she's going to tell us about that much more. So a warm welcome, Solveig.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good morning.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For me, as I'm a blind person, it's always really interesting to know how professionals decide to work with people with visual impairment. So could you tell me about that, please?
That is a very long, peculiar story. And the thing is that when I was young, I wanted to become a teacher. I wanted to become either a teacher of history or sports and gymnastics. We had a wonderful history teacher in my school, and he was perfect. And I loved all kinds of gymnastics and sports. But then I thought, oh, history doesn't change during the years. So that will be a little bit dull. And then I don't know in what shape I am when I'm 65. And poor kids, if they have an old teacher who is really bad. But I wanted to become a teacher, so I decided to become a primary school teacher, because there I could have each and everything. And so I realized I am 1 year too young to get into the teacher training college. And the problem was then you could get there from the secondary school. So I took the upper secondary school 1 more year, and then I got in. Okay, on the last year of this one, I was supposed to give some kind of a introduction to a special field. And then I happened to live in Helsinki, and the School for the Blind was in Helsinki. So I called them and asked, is it okay if I come and interview you? And they said, yes, please welcome. And then what happened, I was very scared. I thought small blind children sitting in the corner being very, very, very sad. And I opened the door there. 3 youngsters were running down the stairs and running into the classroom, the door behind them. And I realized, oh, those were the pure blind children. And I somehow, I thought it was very interesting. I went to see the director, and she then showed me the whole school, and everything I saw was wonderful. It is a very small house that was really a very, very cozy one. And then she asked me, do you want to become a teacher for the blind? One of my colleagues is going to retire in 2 years, and we need a new teacher. And I said, why not? It seems interesting. So then when I was a primary school teacher, I then had 1 year studies to become a blind school teacher.
And so then first you studied to be a normal, let's say general primary school teacher, exactly. And then as an extra training you had special education.
Exactly, 1 year. And that meant then that I got a job, but only as a part-time teacher with 12 lectures per week. 12 lectures per week. What on earth shall I do with the rest of my time? But then I realized I had the 2 years before the matriculation exam. And that meant that I thought, okay, in 4 months I can do that. I mean, I'm a teacher. I have been studying for 4 years, so I should be able to do it. So every third day I had a test, and I slept 2 hours per night, and then I got my matriculation exam in the spring. And then I was told that this teacher didn't want to retire after all, because her husband had died and her children had gone abroad. So I thought, okay, I can't live on what today would be 60 euros per month. So I had to find a new job. And I found one as a secretary at the international department in an advertising agency. And what did I get from there? Yes, got languages because I was bad at languages at school, and I started studying them like mad. And then they taught me in this Arbetarinstitutet, which is a school for adults with a lot of interesting subjects there, and they taught the way I learned. So I ended when they called me one day in 1972. Do you want to become the head of the school? I said, why not? Why not? And what I had with me in my luggage then was languages and used to paperwork. And that is what you need as a director for the school.
Wow, so that's quite a long journey until you finally, let's say, ended up in the Swedish School for the Blind. May I ask you how come that in Helsinki, Finland, there's a Swedish School for the Blind?
Then we have to go back to 1323, because that was, you know, that in Europe, people have been fighting all the time, one country for the other, and the Swedish kings were very, very keen on fighting. And in that year, there was a peace treaty, and then Sweden got Finland as a part of, so it was the eastern part of Sweden. And because of that, for example, in 1640, the Åbo Academy, the first university, was created in Finland, and that was Swedish at that time. It still is. And then the first school for the blind in 1865 was the Swedish School for the Blind, which meant that it was even before the general children got the primary schools, because that was 1 year later, but by the same man. So we Swedes, or Swedish-speaking Finns, because I mean I'm really a Finn, but Swedish as mother tongue, live along the coastline of Finland. And everyone who has seen a map of Finland knows that it is a lady with a very wide skirt and saying hello with her right hand, and that's the map of Finland. It looks exactly like that. And and from the hand down and along the coastline, we have then Sweden on one part, and then the Baltic countries south from us, and Russia to the east. And that's why there is a Swedish school, a lot of Swedish schools. But the Swedes are 6% of the numbers in the country.
Tell me if I jump too much in time, but how did you become finally the headmaster of the school?
It was just that they phoned me and asked me. In 1972, they phoned me. I said, yes, okay. Yeah, and then, but at the same time, there had been 2 Finnish schools for the blind, one in Helsinki and one in Kuopio. And they were at that time combined in a school in Jyväskylä. So then the Finnish school was in Jyväskylä, which is the center part of Finland, and my little school was then in Helsinki. And all of a sudden, Finnish-speaking parents with clever children were thinking, living in Finland, in Helsinki or the area around, why send the child to Jyväskylä when there is a school in Helsinki? And as we have a 2-year preschool, that meant that I always said that they smiled at the right place by Christmas and they spoke by Easter. So that meant that they very quickly learned the language in the preschool, where there was no you didn't have to know a lot of things. You just had the pleasure of learning everything that you needed.
Really useful. Really useful for a kid.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So at that time, I suppose most children with a visual impairment studied in segregation, right?
Yes, quite right. And at that time, because inclusion was coming approximately 10 years, not 5-10 years later. But the thing is that then the next year, we got the compulsory 9-year school for the children in all schools. And that meant that all of a sudden, all the systems were changing. And that was 1 year after I had become the director of the school. So all of a sudden, I got quite a lot of extra work, but very interesting one. And because then it meant that we had to have new books, new curriculums, new everything. And that was for the kids from grade 1 to grade 6, whereas those from 7 to 9, they were then going according to the old system. And new books, but the Finns needed new books, we needed new books, and the Finns were so many more, but we needed exactly the same, even if not so many copies of it. So we sat and we wrote day in and day out and night in and night out to get the books to the children. Yeah. And then another interesting thing, because we in Finland we have quite a lot of languages in school, and as we then had the Finnish and Swedish speaking families behind us, that meant that the Finnish children as the first foreign language got English, the Swedish ones got Finnish in grade 3. In grade 5, the Swedish ones got English, and the Finnish ones should have gotten Finnish, but you can't start Finnish with the way you teach them in Finnish in the Swedish schools. So I decided, hey, we do it so that we take a Finnish teacher and we teach it as mother tongue for them, with Finnish culture, with Finnish literature, etc., writing Finnish essays, and that went very well. And then in the grade 7, they then had the possibility, for example, to get French or German or actually Russian as well. One child, a Finnish Hungarian.
Wow, that's really special to have so many foreign languages already in primary school.
Yes.
I think it's really, really cool for blind kids also.
It's very good. It's very good. And I mean, I now, as I said, the best thing I had in my luggage was the languages, but that comes a little bit later, because I have to tell a funny story with this what we call modersmålsinriktad finska, that is Finnish as a mother tongue in a Swedish school. And I was at a meeting, and the guys were talking there that in Helsinki it's very such a problem, because so many children in the Swedish schools know Finnish so well that's idiotic for them to sit there with the others. And I said, we have this system in our school, but that's not in the legislation, they told me. But we do it anyway. I said, okay. So that meant that next year I came back to the same kind of meeting, and they said, we have found a superb idea. Finnish as mother tongue in the Swedish school. Oh, you have done that, I was thinking.
Great. So you gave them a great idea.
I gave them a great
you
idea,
inspired legislation. That's
Exactly.
very important.
Yes,
That's very important.
Yeah. And I go back to legislation, because that is another interesting thing. When we started the inclusion of the students, that meant that we did a lot of job that was not in the legislation.
Am I right that it happened already back in the 80s?
Yes.
Wow, that's just amazing. You know, in Hungary, legislation permits inclusion from the 90s, but actually, I would say in practice it started back in after the year 2000. Not many students dared to go to inclusion before that. Yeah.
But one of the things was that many went into the upper secondary, to the gymnasium, you know.
Yeah.
And there were, I mean, we quit school when at the 9th class, and then when they wanted to continue, it had to be in a regular school, because there were nothing for us. But the thing is that a very clever man from the school administration asked all the school directors of the state of schools, please come, tell us what you are doing. There is no legislation about this. And we told him what we were doing. Good, now we put it in the legislation. So that was that.
Yeah, we would need policymakers like that very often.
And then the next thing was, of course, that we have to become a resource center to be able to do these things officially. So the Ministry of Education wrote a letter, please tell us, how would you like to do that? And I took the teachers and we went together and were thinking about it. Then I took the staff and we went through what is happening in the dormitories, etc., etc. And then we put together, sent it to the ministry. They put a stamp on it and sent it back. So we were allowed to decide what should be done and what we were doing. And that was the best thing. Not politicians telling us what to do, but those who really know what it's all about are the ones who ought to do it. Full stop.
I'm really curious to ask you, you know, Finnish education is of course world famous, and already perhaps you are mentioning one particularly important thing, but you as a person working for many years in the Finnish education system, what would you mention as the strengths of this system?
I would say that this 9-year compulsory school was one of the most important things, because before that the clever ones went into the secondary school, whereas the others remained in primary school. But then when everyone was put together, that meant that you had a possibility really to go further. And then I was told then that all teachers have a university degree, which means that they are really on a very high level. And that also meant that poor kids and rich kids were in the same class, and the poor ones could get a lot of experiences that they otherwise wouldn't have had. And then I will say one more thing that a Finnish teacher told me, and that is that Finnish language is very difficult to learn because it's like the Hungarian with no prepositions, but a lot of endings, which means that learning it is not simple if you are not a Hungarian or a Finn. But on the other hand, they every letter is always pronounced in the same way. They don't have the C in their language, they don't have the Z, they don't have the W, they don't have the X, etc. So there are several letters that they don't have. And as this teacher told me, that when you know the alphabet, you can read anything. And that is the good thing. Because, I mean, we take Swedish, we take Hungarian, we take English, we take German, whatever language, you always have peculiarities in the pronunciations and the way it's written. Whereas the Finns don't have that problem. So it makes it easier. But what I read a couple of weeks ago was that now the systems in the school, or say the schools are not as good as they were. And the differences are that the girls are much better than the boys. The rich and those with parents who have a higher education are better than the ones that don't have this high education. So things are not getting better, and somehow I have, and this is my own idea, and it's stupid, I know, but I think the new technology has made it when everyone is sitting where they're and just looking what they are doing. I don't know. And that's more a boys thing. And then the boys are more sportive than the girls, and the girls usually have liked to sit and read. So I presume that's it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it makes me think a lot, because here in Hungary, students are mixed. So the rich and the poor may be in the same classroom, and still we cannot say that our education would be at a high standard. So yeah, I'm pretty sure you know something there in Finland that we perhaps don't know about education. Of course, I know there's lots of components, finances, and so on. All right, may we jump many years, I suppose. But it's very important to speak about your international experience, work experience. I know that you traveled a lot, you worked in many different countries in longer projects.
Yes, but
where did it start? How did it start?
Actually, it started thanks to the fact that I know both Finnish and all the Nordic languages, or understand. I don't speak them all, but I understand them all, thanks to Swedish. And because of that, the Nordic.
So is Swedish the key in understanding all the other Baltic languages?
Exactly.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing is that Swedish, Norwegian almost sound like Danish. The words are very much the same, but the pronunciation is totally different. And Icelandic people usually speak either Norwegian or Danish. And for me, that has been very simple. And as I then speak Finnish as well, that means that I have been able to cope with the systems. And then after that, for example, when we started the resource center systems and integration, then there was the Helios 2 project that was very, very good for resource center activities and how to do that. And that was a project with people from several European countries. And that meant that I had the possibility to really get in contact with them. And I let them come to Finland. And one funny incident. Am I allowed to?
Please.
Yeah, because they came here in January. And at that time in January, the lakes were icy. Of course, you could walk on the ice.
Wow, and incredible!
A guy from Portugal walked out on the ice and said, "I'm Jesus, I'm walking on the water." So it was an experience for him that he hadn't had before. Yeah. But anyway, those things made to begin with. I mean, a resource center was what I had been creating here. Resource centers, because 2 schools from Finland were allowed to participate in it, and my school was one of them. So I was rather happy about it. And then, of course, came the system with ICEVI, where we had a lot of projects here that we then told about during ICEVI meetings here and there. So, for example, there was a very important 5-year project that the Nordic a Nordic ministry system had with Batten's disease. That was something that Spielmeyer-Vogt, some call it a Batten's disease, others, and that was a very important and interesting project, because we had one student with this disease, but then we got a lot of information from those who had more of them and really knew what it was all about. So things like that have been very important. And then, as I said, in 1999, I think it was in Sao Paulo, ICEVI World Meeting, and there I then became the Baltic and Nordic representative. And the funny thing, as I told you, that I had learned a lot of languages, among them Russian, was that the Nordic I took the Baltic headmasters to my school. And we had a very nice meeting there. I thought we would start with presentations, and then it occurred that the one from Lithuania knew French, the one from Latvia knew German, the one from Estonia knew English and Finnish, And I thought this is going to be very funny with me functioning as interpreter here. But then the Estonian lady said, we have a language that we all know, Russian. So we had the whole thing in Russian.
Wow.
And I was very happy that I had happened to study.
Yeah, I really see that languages absolutely were or have been or are important in your life.
That has been really the way of coming anywhere and the way of doing things. Because, I mean, without that, I wouldn't have done a percentage of what I managed to do after that.
Yeah.
But then I had another problem as well, and that is that I didn't have a university degree. So what should I do? I started by picking from 4 different universities. In one university, it was social psychology. In another university, it was psychology. In the third one, it was sociology. But then when it came to special education, then I was wondering what on earth to do, because I was the one to talk about visual impairment and the education of visually impaired in Åbo Academy, the Swedish one. So I decided, okay, I go to Jyväskylä and do it there. And Jyväskylä is then 4 hours by train from Helsinki there, and 4 trains, 4 hours back. And being a school director, I thought, can I do it? But then I decided, okay, I have 1 day without lectures when I have to be there. And you know, before there were any smartphones, it was possible to sit on the train and work for 8 hours without being disturbed.
Yeah, sure.
So it was the most efficient time on the train. Yeah, and then I got my degree, and I could. And I think that was the reason.
Great. Yeah. The only place I have been to in Finland is Jyväskylä, and it was very special to be there. I also visited the Onerva school.
Yes,
students with visual impairment there. I'm really grateful that they hosted me and my colleagues. So
yes, exactly. And that was one of the reasons I decided about the Jyväskylä University, because of the Onerva that then had another name. Because then I could, the first thing, again, talk with them and discuss with them things that were important. And I knew that because of them, the education in Jyväskylä was better than in any other university. So I had to take a sip of water.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the meantime, let me ask a question, or let me jump again in time. Yeah. We know each other thanks to a very nice and very important colleague of mine, Emmy Csocsán. Yes. And both you and Emmy told me stories about your work together, your journeys together. Now I remember one, again related to languages, that you had to learn Arabic.
Yes.
Right? And Arabic Braille. And so how did that happen?
It was again thanks to Emmy's work in Dortmund. And Dortmund University had a cooperation with the German Jordanian University in Amman. And because of that, we had done some work other places as well before that. And then she asked me, would you mind coming there together with me? Because she had done the mathematics and all the wonderful things you do with your hands, which I can't, and she can. So then I went to this Arbis, where I had studied the other languages. And there I realized, okay, you write like that, okay. And I learned enough to learn the Arabic Braille. And then the funny thing was that Emmy came, and we had to put our act together, as I call it. And she came and participated in one of the lectures and took a paper and a pencil. And she drew Arabic as if she had done it all her life, like a real master. And I had never had good numbers in anything that had to do with hands. So I write like as I said, a 5-year-old kid.
But you were a really cool team, as you told me, because Emmy was perhaps, well, better, or she's the professional in mathematics, perhaps arts, but languages, So how did that happen? How did you share the work when you were working together in the different countries?
The funny thing was that we didn't have to do anything but realize, because it was evident, being the professor she is, and having the brain she has, that this is absolutely her variation. And as I had I had actually not been teaching very much braille during my time as a teacher, but the thing is that, of course, I knew it, of course, and thanks to the student who wanted to learn Russian, I thought, oh, Russian braille, how Russian braille, how can I do that? And then it occurred to me when I started checking it, that it was much easier to learn Russian through braille than with the way with their Cyrillic letters. So
wow. In Hungary, I was the first year or grade who didn't have to learn Russian, so I missed this opportunity.
But I usually take as an example, when you are in Russia and you see very often Pektopach, written Pektopach, then you put it in braille, and what is that? It's a restaurant. So the P is an R, etc. So Pektopach is restaurant. Yeah. And because of this restaurant, I knew exactly that this is easy. So whatever language you want to learn that has peculiar letters or signs or whatever they have around the world, it's much easier to do it via braille, in case you want to learn it. I had that experience also as I got some Vietnamese, two Vietnamese, both refugees earlier, and I had to teach them Finnish. And the funny thing was that the first lecture I had a French interpreter. So French interpreter with Vietnamese and Swedish speaking Finn teaching Finnish. That's what I call peculiar. Yeah. But let's go back to Emmy and me, because the reason that we actually met was a mix-up, because we had gotten the wrong letters during in Bratislava ICEVI meeting. And the thing was, she got dear Solveig and I got dear Emmy, and the end result, who's that? Okay, I knew Emmy because I had participated in one of her lectures on mathematics a couple of years earlier, some years earlier. But this led to so many incredible things. And
can we try to make a list of the countries, the institutions that you worked together for during those many years?
Yes.
I know it would be at least a 24-hour project to go into details, but still, can we try?
Yeah, I will try to do it to the point.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the first one, I came to Dortmund, and that was okay. Then after that, she came to Finland because of the maths project that I had decided on as the last thing before I retired. And then came the book that we prepared together with the Nordic team. And that is now in 8 languages, the math seen with other eyes. And then after that, I was asked to go to Kosovo, and because of that, I needed an expert in mathematics because of the work in Peja, that was their school for the blind.
It was a 2-year project, right?
It's a 2-year project, yes.
And did you actually move to Kosovo, or you just traveled there quite often?
I moved there. So I lived
great.
2 years in Kosovo with bombs exploding a little bit here and there. and other interesting things.
Mm.
But the job there was very interesting and very good, and we had a good boss that then gave us ideas and loose reins, and that was the best thing. So it was again a question of resource centers and teacher training and training of teacher trainers and discussing with the ministries and other people involved in the education. And then after that, well, in the middle of that, may I tell you something else? Because
sure.
I had to go to Morogoro for the first time in Tanzania. And I went there. Then I thought I was supposed to talk about visual impairment, but I was supposed to talk about hearing impairment as well, that I never had done in my life. But I had written a book about it because they needed it in Kosovo Academy. Peculiar lady, huh? I had no, but you can always find things and do it, yeah, and that's what I did. But there were two very interesting things, and the first one was it was about two schools for the blind, one class and one school, and inclusive school. The class, there were the children were sitting in a very dark brown room, facing the walls that were dark brown. Everything was dark brown. They were having the reglets, and it looked so dull. And then there was actually one Perkins Braille, but that's one stood just to show we have it. And then another.
So one Perkins Braille for the whole class, one single.
Yeah, but I don't think they ever used it. That didn't look like that. But then another school where they had 5 integrated students. And the funny thing, there were 80 students or more than 80 students in the classroom, and 5 of them were visually impaired.
Wow.
And they all had the materials in Braille, whereas the sighted had one book that went from student to student. And the reason was that they had a blind guy who was making the books for them. Yeah. Wow. Okay. But then I came back to.
Well, that's very special. I mean.
Oh, yes, that's what I thought.
We just complain, you know, that in many Hungarian classes there are 32 students. So to hear that there might be 80.
Over 80. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. But
incredible.
Then the next peculiarities in my life, I mean, as I told you, everything is peculiarities. I was sitting, and I had finished the Kosovo thing, and I was sitting at the airport in Budapest. Have you heard about that city ever?
No, never.
Yeah. And then I heard a lady at the next table talking about special schools and things like that over the phone. And when she finished, I said, "Oh, that's funny. I just finished a job in Kosovo." "What? Did you finish that? Do you mind coming to Romania?"
Wow.
Okay. And then I said, "Oh, no."
So we can say you got your next job at the airport of Budapest.
Exactly. Yeah.
Adventures.
Yes. And there was exactly the same things as I have been doing in Kosovo. So it was easy for me to go.
And again, you moved there.
And then I moved there. Yes. And there I got a very, very good counterpart, Mariana Pop, and she was so knowledgeable of everything in Romania. So it was very easy for me to then, together with her, do the jobs we ought to do. That is resource centers and inform the ministries, etc. So everything went extremely well, thanks to her, because I talked to her and said, you knew it also, just good that you could now do it together. Yeah, only because you came there and told us what to do. Okay, but I have checked, they still have the resource centers working there perfectly. So that felt good. And then, shall we go to Tanzania?
Yeah,
Back to
please, let's
Tanzania?
do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
heard quite a lot from Emmy about Tanzania, and it's super interesting, you know,
Yes.
to imagine that the conditions there were absolutely different from what we have in Europe.
Exactly.
At the university, or just thinking of the everyday life of blind people or people with visual impairments.
Yes.
Super interesting.
Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, I had already been in Morogoro, but it was then Sekuko in the other part. So Morogoro is rather far south, whereas Morogoro was then in close to the Kenya border. So we had a nice walks over the hills and did a lot, but not the Kilimanjaro. Yes.
And you were educating special needs teachers there, QTVIs?
Yes, yes. So that was the general idea. And the thing is that, again, what they all have told in all the places where I've been, and it's not thanks to me, but thanks to the fact that when we teach about visual impairment, it's really hands-on training. It is a question of learning by doing. It's a question of really going to the person who is doing and training something and discuss with them, and not just standing in front of the audience. And
this is something I really love. But please tell me, I'm just thinking, like, you went there,
yes.
2 white European ladies. You have never lived in Tanzania. How hard was it to convince the people there that you know what you are talking about? And I'm just you know, wondering that they might have thought, come on, they don't know our conditions, they don't know our circumstances, so how come they explain to us? Wasn't it a hard job, a tough job?
No, it was not. The interesting thing is we were really they really loved the fact that we came there, because we didn't try to renew them in any way. We just taught them things that they needed. And what they really said was that they were so happy to have people who really were interested in how they would learn, how they would do, what their experiences were, etc. And also walking down the street, for example, all the small kids coming towards you. Good morning, madam. Good morning, madam. Good morning, madam. So, I mean, you felt like something out of the ordinary, but never in a negative way.
Yeah, that's forever. Lovely. Yeah. That's so
except
lovely.
For my first lecture there, when I came to Sekuko in Lushoto, because they were almost having a big row in the university as they hadn't received any visual impairment information. And then came this old lady, and they wondered, what did they take here to save the situation? Is she really capable of anything? Does she know anything? But then they started listening, and then they informed the others that were supposed to come, and the class was filling during that day and the next day, and then everything could start normally. I was accepted, not bad.
I'm just thinking how to put my question. It's not so easy. I'm sure you're going to understand. So how tough did you feel it was to be blind or low vision in those days in Tanzania? Because of course there are differences from country to country to what extent persons with disabilities are accepted. So what do you think?
I would say that the students that we had, some of them were visually impaired as well, and they were surprisingly good with their situation.
Mhm.
And then we went to schools, we went to places where they were, and somehow they, as my idea throughout my life has been, if you get education, you don't have a problem more than anyone else.
Mhm.
I mean, you have
Mhm.
challenges. You have a lot of challenges,
Mhm.
and you may think that why on earth, I was going to use a bad Hungarian word, but why on earth am I the one to have this problem?
Mhm.
But there are so many with that don't have that kind of problems, who fall deeper, they can much deeper than a person with an impairment of any kind.
Yeah.
And that is a question that it's very difficult for a sighted person to tell anything. But when you meet the people, when you talk to them, and when you realize that that person has so much more in his brain than I do, then I mean, it's fantastic.
Mhm.
It's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I have had to work with people from minorities, and I myself belong to a minority. And there was a time when this minority was not very accepted in this country. When I was, let's say, around 20,
Mhm.
I heard a lot of not so pleasant words about me and my existence. And but the thing is that today the situation has changed, because I mean, people know more and they accept more. And as I said, I will tell you a good story about people who don't believe in persons with an impairment.
Mhm.
There was a teacher, we had a student that went, a Finnish speaking student from the Swedish school, continuing in Finnish upper secondary and gymnasium, and the Finnish teacher called me. How come that you send from a Swedish school a blind student to me? I'm used to good results. It's terrible. I said his parents are allowed, and he is allowed to choose whatever school he wants. And that was not your school. 3 months later, she called. Thank you very much. He is my best student. So the people themselves can change the ideas.
Yeah, although very lucky that she was not in the position to say no.
Exactly.
So,
Because I mean, he had the right to go there.
yeah.
And but the funny
Yeah.
thing was also that the Swedish teacher threw him out from the classroom because his Swedish was better than hers. But she was a clever lady, and the best students she put in a group together with him as a discussion.
Mhm.
So you just have to find the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say also to Emmy, to you as well, that I wish I were as active and energetic when I retired as you two are. Yeah, apart from the COVID, we know that it has changed our life a lot, but how do you spend your days recently?
Well, the wonderful thing was that I had to move to a new part of Helsinki. And this new part of Helsinki happens to be a very new part of Helsinki.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but it's I live on something called the artist street.
Mhm.
And that means that all the buildings are so fantastically built that, and with such fantastic colors, etc., etc. The yards are perfect for children, for adults, for old people, for each and everyone, and wonderful flowers that you can feel the sense of, and you can touch them, and you can do whatever you wish with them. And then there are forests around here, parks around here. So I have had the pleasure of walking around a lot. And
Great.
that is very good for an old lady, you know.
Yeah, that's super healthy, but I know that you also do lots of brain activity and you keep learning Hungarian.
Exactly. And now I have a funny situation as well, and that is the fact that two young men from Kosovo have moved into my house, and I ought to go back and check my Albanian as well. Yeah. Nagyon fontos lenne egy kicsit nehéz azt is, mert hogy angolul beszélek, finnül, svédül minden nap, és most is itt magyarul kell beszélni, és
Come on, that absolutely keeps you, wow, super fit. And I can imagine how surprised those gentlemen were when you started speaking Albanian to them.
You were right.
In the lift or
yes.
wherever.
Yeah. So I used to have long chats, but in Finnish, because I really have to take my Albanian book. But it was rather interesting at that time because all of a sudden I came into a situation where I had to talk to some school directors and some other people, and no one knew English, and I didn't have my interpreter with me. Albana Zogo was an absolutely superb one, but thanks to the fact that I have had interpreters, that meant that I spoke English, the interpreter interpreted, and I was listening, and that meant that I understood a lot rather fast and could even speak a little bit, and then I was wondering, can I manage? But I did manage to tell them what they were supposed to do. Yeah,
I'm quite sure you should write your stories, your life experience down in a book.
Well, there are some people that have thought it would be a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely so. Absolutely so.
But I tell you one funny thing with the languages, because I wrote something called Languages Are Fun. Mm-hmm. And I thought that a printing house here in Finland might be interested in it. Mm-hmm. But no, it was in English. No, we are not interested in English. Everyone knows English in Finland, almost. So as Emmy and I were working on ISaR International at the Doctor University, the homepage there, I thought I put it there because the teaching of visual impairment is really a very international thing because we have such a lot of cooperation with each other. So I put it there. A short time ago, I Googled myself from time to time. I do it just to see what's still hanging there. And hoopsassa, it has come to the UNESCO homepage.
Wow.
So it was not okay in Finland, but UNESCO accepted.
Yeah, perhaps we might share the link to it under this interview so people can check.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Nagyon köszönöm. I'm so grateful. I'm so happy that you were here. Have we missed anything?
If we
I know there are lots of things still to chat about, but
there are still things, but I think we got the most important ones.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much. Take good care. Szia. Szép napot.
Szép napot kívánok neked is.
Szia.